Good morning, class. Good morning, class. Please take your seats. Class is in session. It is I, Dr. Professor Gino, here once again to deliver a lecture. All right, today's should be a good one. You guys are going to like this. The lecture covers 5 investing mistakes young people make. Including, at one point, Dr. Professor Gino was making these. Sometimes I still make these, but we'll be going over them nonetheless. If you guys like financial information, financial lectures, stuff about mindset, money, all this stuff, especially if you're on the younger side, I'll call it under 40, really think about subscribing to Wealth Creation College. Here, I'm Dr. Professor Gino. That's what I try to do, is teach you guys all about this kind of stuff. I've gone through a lot of it, and I'm just trying to pass on what I know. So, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, investing mistake number 1 that young people tend to make. Can anyone in the class guess what it is? Anybody? Bueller? The number 1 mistake is not investing at all. Number 1 investing mistake. Not investing at all, and or not investing regularly, and or only saving money, which is a good first step, right? Not spending it is good. It sitting in your bank account is better than spent on something you didn't need. But alas, lads, it is not the end-all be-all for finance, which makes sense, right? You need to get into the habit of regularly investing. Just doing one lump sum of $100 at some point in time and then forgetting about investing for the next 2 years is not going to do it, all right? This is not the way forward. You have to become comfortable with setting aside money every so often in a format called dollar cost averaging towards an investment or some other wealth building tool that will help you in the long run. All right? It can't be on your radar if you're not thinking about it, and you must think about it in order to do it. So mistake number 1 is not investing or not investing regularly. Let's assume we're past that. All right, now that you want to invest and you've got some money saved up to invest, mistake number 2 that young people tend to make, including yours truly at one point in time, get-rich-quick schemes. This includes meme coins. All right, I know you degenerates out there. I see you guys. It includes meme coins, stock options, random penny stocks that are supposed to pump and flip and do all this stuff and make you 500% on your money in 2 seconds or a day. All that stuff, right? So rule number 1 from Warren Buffett is don't lose any money. Rule number 2 is remember rule number 1. Now, class, if we are investing in get-rich-quick schemes that will say pay out every 5%, like 5% of them, people make good money on them, and that's where the stories come from, and people get excited, and they try to do all this stuff. Let's play a numbers game here. If 5% of the things succeed, and when they succeed, they return, let's call it a 10x, right? Fantastic. And the rest of the time, you lose everything. Is this a good wealth creation strategy? All right, befitting of Wealth Creation College. Run the numbers. No, because all it takes is one mistake and you lose everything. Say you started with $100, right? Your odds of success are 5%, and that might turn into $1,000 at 10x's, right? Great, you succeeded the first time. You picked Pepe the meme coin and it did great. The next time you do Dogecoin, right? Oh, that one ate shit. All right, well, your $1,000 is gone. See what I mean? You start at 0, not at the loss of the product initially or the thing that you invested in initially. I know some of them are tempting, and yes, there are better returns out there than just the S&P 500 10% return year over year. There are better ways to make more money, right? Businesses or other stocks that are going to outperform, but that requires far more effort and analysis. Just be super wary of people promising you ridiculous returns. All right? Mistake number 3, thinking that you can just invest later in life, right? Oh, I don't need to invest now, Dr. Professor Gino. Please, I'm only 18. I'm just going into college, right? I've got a whole lifetime to invest. Yes, that is true. However, 80% of the power of your money disappears within the first 20% of your life. Dr. Professor Gino, what do you mean by that? I'll tell you what I mean by that right after I have some coffee. At 18, $1 invested at a 10% interest rate, right? So again, we're just going with the standard S&P 500 interest rate. Can anyone in the class guess what $1 will be worth by the time you are 65, quote unquote retirement age, which I just call parole? But anyway, separate conversation, separate lecture. Can anyone guess how much it's worth? Somebody got it, I'm sure. The answer is $88. So you 88x whatever you put in now, basically guaranteed, right? This is about as safe as an investment gets. The S&P 500 index fund, like, yes, some years it's higher, some years it's lower, but you're going to get right around that growth rate for the next 47 years, probably. Like, it's very likely. So this is not witchcraft and wizardry, although that is fun stuff. But no, this is just very simple investment stuff. Okay, so you're 18 and you say, I've got all the time in the world, I'll invest later. But if you had put in $1 today, it'd be worth $88 when you're 65. Yes, inflation's a thing, but that's a separate conversation. Now, can anyone in the class guess what that $1 will be worth if instead of investing it at 18, you waited until you were 30, right? Please, Dr. Professor Gino, I can't invest now. I'm going into college. I am going to invest after I'm established in my career, which, what a generic phrase. Who the heck knows what that means? I don't. But let's assume most people feel somewhat established in their careers by the time they're 30, which is probably early. Most people, it's probably around 40, 45, to be honest. But let's just say it's 30. Can anyone guess what that $1 is worth? It's only worth $28. It says right here. See that? $28. Okay. 88x your money at 18, 28x your money at 30. And yet only 12 years have passed, right? You still have the vast majority of the years leading up to 65. So what happened there? Well, there's this funny thing called compound interest, and while it is the eighth wonder of the world, it is absolutely kind of a bitch, sad to say, if you're not on top of your shit. The answer is the more time you leave your money in the market, the longer it takes to grow, or the longer it can run and grow. The vast majority of Warren Buffett's fortune was made after he was 65. Why? Because all the interest rates and percentages of compound growth is off the existing figure. 10% of $1 is 10 cents. 10% of $1 trillion, I don't know, how many billions is that? I don't even remember how trillions and billions work. I think it might be like 33 billion, because I think 100 billion is a trillion, or is it 1,000 billion is a trillion? Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point here being, your money is worth far more when you're younger. And if you think, 28xing your money is not enough when you're 30, just wait until you see how much money it would be worth if you started investing at 40. It's like 7x, right? Instead of 28x. It really drops off drastically. I'll give you another example, okay, class? And this is one of the more critical points of the 5 points here for young people and investing mistakes. If at 18 you said, you know what, I'm going to be on top of my stuff, I'm going to outperform my peers, I'm going to put away and invest $100 a month into the S&P 500 index fund, along with whatever else I do in life, it doesn't matter, but starting when I turn 18, $100 a month into that index fund. If I don't have the money, I'll go mow lawns and pick up trash and do whatever it is, pick up a shift to be able to throw in the $100. All right, and you do that until you're 65. Can anyone guess how much money you're left with, class? The answer is, congratulations, you're a millionaire. That easy. It's that easy. Or should I say, that straightforward, but not that easy, right? $100 a month, while it's not a lot of money, the consistency could be challenging, especially when you're younger, but it's certainly doable. I would argue anybody living inside the United States could do that regardless of your education level. There is work to be done within a month that should leave you with, after expenses, $100. That is not overtly difficult. Now, if you had done the same thing and said, well, Dr. Professor Gino, when I turn 30, I will invest $100 a month into the S&P 500, and I will check to see what I have when I'm 65, when I'm on parole from my life sentence at my 9-to-5 job. Haha. You would have $328,000. Great money. Fantastic money. Don't get me wrong. That's life-changing money, right? It's also less than a third of what you could have had if you had just started at 18 instead of 30. I don't think it's a ton more work, and yet it would have made a huge difference. I'll tell you a quick story. Dr. Professor Gino, me, used to sell sodas and Gatorades and other waters and stuff like that in front of my house on Mission Bay because there were these boat races, right? And I would just walk around the park on Mission Bay and I would sell these things. I was probably like, I don't know, 5, 6. And I'd make great money because I was a cute little kid and I was selling waters and sodas, waters for $1, sodas for $2, Gatorades for $2, whatever it was back then. And the first year, my father would always go with me, of course, to make sure everything was going okay. I made, I think it was somewhere around $250, $300. Whoa, right? And I remember because that was my video game money. I raised my video game money. It was a big deal because that could carry me through the whole year, all the video games I wanted. But I still had to be careful and budget because I couldn't buy every video game right when I showed up to Toys R Us or I would have no money. The next year, my father taught me an important lesson of having to pay for the inventory that you're selling. Of the money we received, I had to pay him back the money we used to buy the sodas and the waters and the Gatorades. And I said, man, this is hard, right? You telling me I don't get to keep all the money that comes in? But if Gino had just taken half that money, right? If I, Dr. Professor Gino, had just taken half the money I earned and thrown it into an index fund, or if my father had been able to convince me to do so, I still would have been able to buy a couple video games and have a great time that year. I don't need that many, right? I don't know what that money would be worth, but it's probably over 100K, right? At the very least, it probably would be by the time I'm 65. And it was just a small amount of money. The point being, time is your greatest asset, and to just assume that you can invest later in life does you an extreme disservice, right? That's mistake number 3. All right, mistake number 4, before this lecture goes on too long and you all fall asleep on me. Buying stuff, not assets. All right, number 4 is buying stuff, not assets. People will try to convince you, youngins, that buying a watch, luxury watch, or some sort of boutique car is an investment. They will say it's a fantastic investment. Or a boat, God forbid. I have a boat, but I know it's not an investment. That's a straight expense. Out the door. Never seeing that money again. They will say it's an investment. Why? Because it goes up in price or it appreciates or it's, it holds its value well. Well, that's almost always a lie. And in the cases in which it's not a lie and it does hold its value well in the face of inflation, it usually doesn't actually appreciate beyond inflation. And even if it does appreciate beyond inflation, it almost never, if for sure never, I'm talking the minuscule percentage of time, like 0.00001% of the time, will it beat out a standard investment in terms of return in the long run. The nicest collector watch that, unless you have access to some sort of crazy catalog that, believe me, if you're young, you don't, unless you come from old money, in which case, congratulations, you still need to learn anyways. Unless you have access to that one-of-one watch that, Tourbillon or Rolex or Tudor, whoever made, Patek Philippe, whatever, the Rolex you just bought for $5K, that's the entry-level Rolex, no, that's not going to, turn into $500,000 by the time you're 65. That's not how that works, right? Don't let people convince you that stuff are assets. Assets generate you value and money or somehow store it. And while you could make the case for some of this stuff, be really cautious. I really think you should just avoid it at all costs, unless you have a special fascination with something, in which case just classify it as an expense in your brain so that you account for it correctly and move on. Don't get convinced that it's a good store of money. All right? It's not a property like real estate or, some sort of other stock or asset. You're buying something that they make a ton of, realistically. If they make a bunch of them, they're probably not that collectorable. And even then, the collecting business is a separate business altogether. Not for the faint of heart. All right. Point number 5. And to close out the lecture, it's probably the most important point, and there's a reason I saved it for last. All right, class? And before I get to that point, if you've been enjoying the lecture, subscribe to Wealth Creation College. comment down below what you've learned, and we'll go over the homework in a minute. Maybe you can drop that down below as well. Point number 5, mistake number 5, not falling in love with the investing process. This needs to become a love affair for you. You need to want to continue to learn about this, guys. You have to be reading books. You got to be reading books. You got to be looking up articles. You got to be talking with your friends. You got to be constantly reanalyzing your situations and new financial products coming out. And it's not because you're going to change your strategy all the time. That's not the point at all. It's that thinking about this and becoming more eloquent and well-read on the subject will cause you to make better decisions and keep up with it. If you don't enjoy what you do, you're either going to be miserable or you're not going to do it for long. And in the case of investing in finances, both are mistakes, right? I don't want you guys to be miserable your whole lives chasing after this stuff, trying to figure it out. Nor do I want you to be poorly educated and stumble and make a bunch of mistakes that cost you a ton of money. So, find a way to like this. Find a way to be interested in this stuff. Find a way to let it be either a hobby or a side passion or a main passion for you guys. If you're here at Wealth Creation College, chances are you're already somewhere on that spectrum of interest. But keep it up. Find other people, find other books. Keep researching, find your way through it, and everything will work out in the end. Because now you have 5 mistakes to avoid as a young lad, right? Or lass, although my demographic is definitely lads. And this shouldn't end there. I have other lectures here on the channel, Wealth Creation College, full of things for you to learn. If you got any questions, drop them down below. But just let this be a starting point, not the end. It's good work for today, and you have learned a lot today. Internalize it, come back to the lecture, revisit, go over your notes, right? Ask me, Dr. Professor Gino, if you got any questions. And for homework class, I want you guys to think of a 6th mistake for young people that they should avoid making with reference to investing, all right? The best way to really know how you've internalized the subject is to create within that subject instead of just regurgitating the information. Based off everything I've said, what would number 6 be? What do you think? What makes the most sense to avoid? Or what's a mistake that you would like other people to avoid that you've made that I didn't cover here? With that being said, I am Dr. Professor Gino, your instructor for Wealth Creation College. This is our lecture on 5 investing mistakes that young people tend to make. So go build something. Class dismissed.